Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to tell you an incredible story that happened at a school in Boston. But first, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from, because these kinds of hidden heroes could be in any school. And maybe you know someone like this too. And if you believe that true leadership is shown quietly, don't forget to subscribe. Because sometimes the greatest teachers are those who don't give lessons. Students called him Uncle Frank. Every morning at 6 a.m. he was at school, cleaning hallways, organizing classrooms. 68 years old, calm, humble. Even the teachers thought he was just a janitor. Until the assistant principal found it while cleaning his locker: West Point Military Academy diploma, colonel rank certificate, and a photo of the brigade he commanded in Afghanistan. Washington Elementary School was one of the historic buildings in Boston's Beacon Hill neighborhood. Opened in 1924, it had educated generations of children. Now it was a vibrant elementary school with 450 students and 35 teachers. Frank Harrison came to school every morning at exactly 6 a.m. He would park his brown Ford pickup in the school parking lot and enter the building with an old thermos of coffee and a small lunch bag. He was 68 years old, medium height, a silver-haired man. His way of moving was slow but determined. Frank's office was in the basement, a small room next to the boilers. It contained cleaning supplies, an old desk, a plastic chair, and a locked metal cabinet. Only a calendar hung on the wall. No other personal items were visible. By the time students started arriving at school, Frank had already finished half his work. He had mopped the hallways, collected the trash, and cleaned the classroom blackboards. When the children saw him, they would greet him with, "Good morning, Uncle Frank." Frank would respond with a calm smile, "Good morning, kids." The teachers respected Frank. He had been working at the school for 12 years, never complained, and did his job quietly. But they knew very little about Frank. Did he have a family? Where had he come from? What work had he done before? No one would answer these questions. Frank didn't answer these questions much either. "I'm retired. Now I work here," he would say. Sometimes, when asked about his former job, he would give the answer, "Government work." This was vague enough. Assistant Principal Sarah Chen had noticed different things about Frank's behavior. How the man walked, upright, disciplined. How he spoke, clear, precise. He didn't use unnecessary words. And most importantly, how he remained calm during crisis moments. Last winter, a pipe had burst. The basement was flooded. While everyone was panicking, Frank remained calm, turned off the water, and got the situation under control, as if he had encountered such situations before. Once, when a fight broke out in the schoolyard, Frank had intervened. 2 eighth-grade students had gotten into it, and the situation was about to turn to physical violence. When Frank stepped between them, the children stopped. He hadn't shouted or threatened. He had simply said, "Stop." But there was such authority in his tone that the children immediately stopped. "How did you do that?" Sarah had asked him. "Experience," was the answer he got. One Friday afternoon, only a few teachers and Frank remained at school. Sarah was working late, preparing plans for the following week. Around 7:30 p.m., she went down to Frank's room to look for something in the building. Frank had gone home. The room was empty. Sarah was looking for spare paper towels. As she stood next to the locked metal cabinet, she wondered, what was in the personal belongings of a man who had been working here for 12 years? The cabinet was locked, but the key was sitting in the small notch on top. Frank lived in a trusted environment. He didn't need to hide his belongings. Sarah turned the key and opened the cabinet. The first thing she saw surprised her. There was a framed diploma hanging on the wall. When she read the heading that said, "United States Military Academy at West Point," her breath caught. It read, "Bachelor of Science degree conferred upon Franklin James Harrison." Date, 1978. Frank was a West Point graduate, America's most prestigious military academy. Only the most select, most talented young men were accepted there. But this was just the beginning. On the bottom shelf of the cabinet was a bound photo album. As Sarah turned the pages, her eyes widened. Young Frank Harrison, in military uniforms, at various ceremonies, on duty. In one photo, young Frank was standing next to his family at the West Point graduation ceremony. He looked proud, upright, with hope-filled eyes toward the future. In other photos, she saw Frank in different countries: Germany, Korea, Iraq. His uniforms were also changing: lieutenant, first lieutenant, major, lieutenant colonel, and finally colonel. Now I'm curious in the comments. Have you discovered someone with such a hidden past at your school? And how would you feel if you encountered such a situation? Write it down. The most surprising photo was at the end. Frank, in desert camouflage uniform, standing in front of a sign that read, Colonel Harrison, 3rd Brigade Combat Team. Behind him were military vehicles, tents, and hundreds of soldiers. Frank was a brigade commander. He was responsible for thousands of soldiers. Sarah closed the album, her hands trembling. Was this possible? Was the quiet janitor at school actually a high-ranking military commander? When she looked at the top shelf of the cabinet, there was more. Medals sat in a metal box: Bronze Star Medal, Army Commendation Medal, Combat Infantry Badge, and most importantly, the Purple Heart, a medal given to soldiers wounded in war. Under the box was another document: retirement papers. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she read the text that said, Colonel Franklin J. Harrison, after 32 years of distinguished service to the United States Army. 32 years. Frank had served in the Army for 32 years. He had graduated from West Point, served at every rank, risen to brigade command. And now he was working as a school janitor. Why? Sarah closed the cabinet and went upstairs. She couldn't sleep that night. How would she talk to Frank in the morning? Should she tell him about these things she had discovered? Monday morning, Frank was at school at 6 a.m. as usual. When Sarah arrived at 7:30 a.m., she found him in the hallway doing his usual work. Good morning, Frank. Good morning, Sarah. Frank, can I talk to you? In my office? Frank looked up. Something was different in Sarah's tone. Sure. Is there a problem? Sitting in Sarah's office, Frank looked comfortable. He had been here for 12 years. He was used to talking with the assistant principal. Frank, I was in your room Friday evening. I was looking for paper towels. Frank's facial expression didn't change. He waited. I opened your cabinet. I'm sorry, I should have asked permission. Now, a slight smile appeared on Frank's face. What did you see, Sarah? I saw the West Point diploma, the photos, the medals. Frank nodded. Yes. Frank, were you a colonel? A brigade commander? Used to be, a long time ago. Sarah leaned forward. You served in the Army for 32 years. Why are you working here as a janitor? Frank looked out the window. He watched the children playing in the yard. Then he turned to Sarah. Sarah, for 32 years, I told people what they should do. I gave orders, made decisions. I was responsible for the lives of thousands of people. He paused, took a deep breath. When I retired, I no longer wanted to be responsible. I just wanted to serve. Quietly. But why school? Frank smiled. Because children are our future. I protected them in war. Now I protect them in schools. Nobody knows. They don't need to know. What matters is not what you do or who knows about it. Sarah listened quietly. There was deep wisdom in Frank's words. But Frank, if teachers knew your past, they would see me differently. And I don't want this. I just want to be Frank. Uncle Frank. Don't you ever miss it? The command, the authority, Frank thought. Sometimes. But here there's a different kind of authority. The authority of love. Children respect me because they know I love them. This is much more powerful than the authority of fear. That week, Sarah watched Frank with different eyes. How the man moved, how he talked to children, how he solved problems. Third grader Tommy Jenkins was crying at lunch. Other children were bullying him. Frank approached and crouched next to Tommy. What happened, Tommy? They're saying mean things to me, Uncle Frank. That I'm different. Frank touched Tommy's shoulder. Tommy, being different isn't a bad thing. Being different means being special. What things make you special, Tommy thought. I like to read books. And I can do math. There, you can read, you can do math. This makes you very special. The bullies might be jealous of you. Really? Really? And remember, Tommy, real strength is not hurting others, but protecting others. Tommy's face lit up. He hugged Frank and ran back to the playground. Sarah had watched this conversation. Frank's words weren't the words of an ordinary janitor. These were the words of someone with leadership experience, someone who knew how to motivate people. A month later, a new student came to school. Michael Rodriguez, a fourth-grade student whose father was retired from the Army. The child was having trouble adapting to the new environment. He was quiet and withdrawn. When Michael was sitting alone at lunch, Frank sat next to him. "Hello, Michael. I'm Frank. How's it going here?" "Fine," Michael muttered. "I heard your father is military." Michael looked up. "Yes, Colonel, but he's retired." "Which unit was he in?" "82nd Airborne. Do you know anything about soldiers?" Frank smiled. "A little. My father always shouts, 'Airborne.' Do you know what it means?" "Of course." "Would you answer all the way?" Michael's eyes sparkled. "Yes. Do you know military too?" "I used to have a little connection." Their conversation continued. Frank explained military terms to Michael, told him how honorable his father's profession was. The child began to feel much better. The following week, Michael's father met Frank at school. When the two men started talking, Sarah noticed that Michael's father showed great respect to Frank, as if he understood who Frank was. Later, she learned that Michael's father had researched Frank's brigade command. He'd found news on the internet about Frank's duties in Afghanistan. Frank was considered a hero there. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Sarah asked one day. "Because the past is the past, Sarah. What matters is what you're doing now." "But children, teachers, they could learn so much from you," Frank thought. "Maybe you're right. But I don't like to give lessons. I prefer to be an example." When fall came, an event was organized at school. Veterans Day ceremony. Students would prepare projects about veterans. Veteran family members would be invited to school. Sarah approached Frank. "Frank, would you speak at this event? Would you tell children about your military experience?" Frank hesitated. "I don't know, Sarah. Quote, please, just 10 minutes. You're a real hero and children need to know this." On the day of the event, Frank was standing on stage. 450 students, teachers, and parents were listening to him, but he wasn't a uniformed colonel. He was Uncle Frank, in his usual clean but simple clothes. "Hello, children. I'm Frank. You know me. I served in the Army for 32 years, but I didn't come here today to talk to you about the military. I came to talk about serving." There was silence. Everyone was listening carefully. There are many ways to serve: being a soldier, being a teacher, being a doctor, or being a janitor. What matters is not what job you do, but how you do that job. I chose to work at your school because you are our future, and serving our future is the greatest honor for me. Remember, real heroes are not people who brag and praise themselves. Real heroes are people who quietly do their work and help others. The applause was loud and long, but Frank's favorite moment was when little Tommy came up to him after the ceremony and said, "Uncle Frank, I want to be like you too." "Tommy, you're already like me, because you have a good heart." That day, Frank's story spread throughout the school, but no one treated him differently. He was still Uncle Frank. He was still met with the same love, the same respect, because real respect comes from character, not from ranks. At the end of our story, I ask you, do you know the ordinary people around you? Have you wondered about their stories? Share in the comments, because we all have a lot to learn. And if this story affected you, don't forget to like and subscribe, because true leadership begins with quietly being an example. Frank Harrison taught us this: whatever the past may be, our real value is measured by how we live now.